Hi guys, Derp Nerd here, coming at you with the Kerbal Space Program single stage to orbit craft. And we're going to be going over how to make a single stage to orbit craft, a more complex one, and we're going to go to the moon hopefully. So let's get into the spaceplane hangar. And in the spaceplane hangar, we're going to go ahead and choose a cockpit. Now, for price purposes, the Mark 1 cockpit is probably the cheapest, so we're going to go with a Mark 1 cockpit. Next, I do like the Mark 2 cockpits because it gives you the front attachment node that is full 1.5 meter size. But moving on. So next you'll want to choose what type of single stage to orbit do you want to make. Since we're doing a more complex design, we're going to do jet and nuke. So we're going to do a combination of jet engines and a nuclear engine, which is right here. Now nuclear engines are heavy, relatively. They're about twice the mass of a turbojet engine. So we're going to have to keep that in mind. Now we're going to have to pick fuel tanks. So obviously the more rocket fuel we bring with us, the farther it can go in space. But we need to choose the amount of jet fuel for the amount of rocket fuel we're going to bring along. So I like the Mark II fuselage or the Mark I fuselage. With the update, they've been changed to be more balanced. So we're going to actually pick the Mark I fuselage. Very similar amounts of fuel, only 10 different, but the mass is 0.2 different. Also, Mark II fuselage has a higher crash tolerance. So, another thing you want to think about is engine placement. And we're going to actually bring along 2 of these FLT400 fuel tanks. And place them like here or so. And so, what you'll want is once all is said and done, you'll want your center of mass to be close to the center of your heaviest fuel tank. So as you drain the fuel, the oxidizer being the heaviest part, the center mass doesn't move much, and this will help you to keep stable during re-entry. Now we're going to put some jet engines on there. Alright, and as you see, it affects it a little more because it's a little farther away. But that's fine. So we're going to go ahead and do air intakes. Now, air intakes are still rather cheaty. You can get away with less of them now, but the more you have, the easier it's going to be to get your ship into orbit. And they're pretty light. Their mass is 0.011. So I like to use the trick with the cubic octagonal struts. However, for tech tree purposes, I've discovered that the docking ports work extremely well for the same kind of glitch where you can do 2 at once. So I'll show you that real quick once I get these positioned where I want them. In fact, I'll just do 1 and show you what I mean. So we're going to go into aerodynamic, ram air intake, and we're going to do 2. So there's 1, see how it fits on the inside, and there's 2. Now the tough part is grabbing the docking port on the inside. So there we are. And we can use symmetry now. So we're going to keep this up there, and we're just going to copy and paste from it. So there we go. And we're going to delete this because there's no point to it. Next we're going to work on wings, obviously, because that's one of the few things we don't have. But first I'm actually going to put on fuel lines. Make sure we have fuel flow both ways because the rocket needs to burn the oxidizer and the jet needs to burn the jet fuel. Another way you can get around that is putting your rockets on your fuel tanks. But the way we're doing it, that wouldn't work out very well. So, oops. We're going to put wings on this bad boy. And I found that one of the most important things for keeping a stable re-entry, actually, ironically, is keeping the air intakes towards behind the center of mass. And we'll be doing that by using the wings to our advantage. So we're going to put a set of wings back here, and we're going to have them go out a little bit. So there we go. So there's our first set of wings. Now we're going to see how out here they're behind the center of mass. That's going to help us out by keeping it by keeping the craft steady as we re-enter, because the most drag will be on these parts. We're also gonna add vertical stabilizers, and I like to use these guys. In the past, I had a preference of delta wing over the swept wings, but no longer. The delta wing, I think they balanced it out a little, but they're definitely basically co-equal, except the delta wing's a lot bigger, so you can fit, you know, 2 swept wings in the surface of a delta wing, so just keep that in mind. So we're going to put another set of wings out a little farther, and I like to make them straight so that it looks relatively straight. And oh, I got rid of the air intake, so we're going to have to go back in and copy and paste this again. No problem. Alright, and that should be plenty of intakes for 2 jets. That's 8 intakes apiece. However, it looks rather ugly, so we're going to move these intakes. Looks are something only you can determine, obviously. There we go. And of course, 8 intakes, I probably don't need to dual stack them like this. Oh dear. So we could probably just do individual intakes. Also, the docking ports, they add drags, which is why you need to worry about the placement of your air intakes, because the docking ports add a lot of drag. So we're gonna put this here. There we are, and delete this guy. There we go. And now our center of lift is very far back. We're gonna need control surfaces, so we need to bring that center of lift forward. So what we're going to end up doing is put a pair of canards up here. However, I don't think that'll help us as much as we need it to. If I can get it. Okay. Oh, it looks like it did a decent job. So let's go through and drain our fuel tanks. So using the tweakables, you can actually go through and simulate your fuel tank drain. So the first thing that I'll drain is, from my experience, this liquid fuel will drain from the jets. So that brings the center of mass back onto our center of lift. That's good. Next, we're going to be burning both liquid fuel and oxidizer. So we're going to be burning oxidizer from here and liquid fuel from here. Now it's pushing the center of mass very far back, especially from this tank. And then we go and finish draining this. Now notice that our center of lift is poking out of our center of mass. I generally don't like that. I want to keep the ball generally inside as we drain our fuel. So we're going to go through and we're going to grab one of the new I-beams, new relative term of course, and if I can flip it the right way, oh, if my keyboard was working, there we go. If we flip it the right way, we're going to put those right there if I hit on symmetry mode. There we go. So now we're going to reposition these so that the center of lift, notice how our center of mass is still moving with these fuel tanks. That's fine. Actually, so now see how that's acceptable. So we're gonna bring this up, we're gonna bring this up, and we're gonna try and make it. Alright, there we go. See? So now as we burn our fuel, the liquid fuel's gonna decrease. Then the oxidizer, oops. Then the oxidizer and the other liquid fuel. So let's make sure we refill all this. Now we're going to save it. Tutorial STO Mark II because 1 is not good enough. And we're going to strut. Generally, the things you need to strut are the lateral or the horizontal builds. So we need to redo our fuel lines. Always check your fuel lines. They're going to get derped up. And another thing that you should generally check are your where you put your landing gear. Put your landing gear on as early as possible. In this design, we could have done it a lot earlier. So we're going to angle these guys down. And what you want to do is put your landing gears close to your center of mass as possible, the rear landing gear. See how close that is? That will give you more torque as you angle up. Now I'm going to put that back because our center of mass will shift to the back, and I don't want to land and tilt up right away. So we're going to reset that, put that there. And another thing, always bring a parachute. Parachutes are good just in case crap goes down. So we're going to put our center lift back there. Alright, that shifted our center of lift a little. So we're going to leave it up like that. Looks pretty cool anyway. So, we're going to go and launch this in just a moment. But first, we're going to action group it. So generally, I do action group 1 is disable the jet engines, or rather toggle them, and action group 2 is the rocket. Another thing you can do is you can unlock the steering from the front wheel. That'll help you in ground movement. And in addition to that, another note on building, try and build horizontally rather than vertically. It'll help you with takeoff. And also, don't build lengthwise. So a fat SSTO is better than a long SSTO, because with long SSTOs you have to worry more about fuel drain. So we're going to go ahead and launch this, save it, and launch it. Alright, here we go. Come on. Alright, let's check our action groups, turn our brakes on, we can turn our lights on. You know, I forgot a generator of some sort. So with SAS, generally you'll want a generator. Also, we're going to use MacJeb and look at the fuel efficiency, or rather the delta V. That's all I use MacJeb for right now. So there's that, and then we need to add on the generator. So we're just going to throw on, you can do nukes or you can do the solar panels. Either way, it works just fine. There we go. So this says 22,000 meters per second. So let's move our engines and see what that actually means. So we have the nuke now in a separate stage, and we can say with full rocket fuel and jet fuel, we're going to get about 3,000 meters per second in space of delta V. Now the issue being, of course, once we get into space, there will be hopefully minimal jet fuel left, so we're going to lower that, and we get 3290 meters per second. So that should be enough to get us to the moon and back, so we're going to take MacJeb off. And yeah, we're ready to fly. Let's check the fuel lines, make sure struts are in place. Yes, they are. And let's go. Alright, turn on the lights, throttle up, and turn on my jets. Now, with space planes, what I generally do is I will angle up to approximately 60 to 70 degrees above the horizon and hold it until I reach around 16,000 meters. And that's so I don't waste time in the atmosphere trying to get my velocity up. You'll see what I mean. One of the things you probably won't see in this design is this prograde marker dropped too far below my heading indicator where I'm actually pointed. And if that starts to happen on one of your designs, your best bet is just to add more lift. It means you either have a lack of lift or a lack of thrust. So my general goal, or my general guideline, is for every one of these have one jet. So if you do something twice as big, carry along 2 jets. 2 jets is a really basic guide on how to do this. So we're going to open our air intake, and we'll be fine for quite a while. Note, I'm not staging the air intakes like I used to. That you can always do that. It will reduce the amount of drag you get, but it's not a huge deal. Trying to keep it as simple as possible. So doesn't get much of a view, does he? So we're approaching 10,000 meters. And 10,000 meters is where I generally start to point down towards the horizon, because the atmosphere at 12,000, the atmosphere starts to decrease. Another thing that can help sometimes is if you hit caps lock, the controls turn blue. That turns on fine controls, and it requires more input to do what you want it to do. So we're going to keep pointing downwards until we're at around 16,000 meters. And I generally aim at this, up until 20,000, I try and aim at 20 to 25 degrees above the horizon. And we're starting to pick up a lot of speed. We will get some re-entry effects, hopefully, too. So I'm not really concerned about engines flaming out. I'm also going to try and arrest my rise to just a little more than 100 meters per second. And try and maintain it at or right above 100 meters per second. That gives the plane plenty of time to speed up, but it also allows us to get a good apoapsis. So we're gonna... Another idea for things you could add on are you could add SAS. SAS torque helps. A lot of times it would be beneficial with the space plane to help it prevent flipping out, especially at high velocity. So notice we're about 27 kilometers. Gonna point prograde for now until we get this down to closer to 100. Also check it in here. And the other thing you want to keep track of is keep your wings relatively flat. That'll help prevent the lift from redirecting your prograde indicator off of 90 degrees. Of course, we go at 90 degrees because of the added orbital speed from the rotation of the Kerbal. So we're going to start throttling down here. 0.12 is generally the throttle down point. One thing to point out here is I'll actually demonstrate it. Once you don't have enough oxygen, instead of flaming out right away, one of your engines will generally decrease in thrust different from the other if you have multiple engine design. So sometimes with heavier payloads you'd have to turn on your rockets by now and point more vertically, and that's perfectly fine. But for lighter payloads, a lot of times you can, lighter payloads or exploration craft, you can just point prograde and use your jets the whole way. So we're gonna keep watching our thrust values here, and also be ready on the hotkey, because if one does flame out, if you shut them both off right away, they won't thrust, which will prevent any real critical flat spinning. We're going very fast. What's our apoapsis? 90,000. That's excellent. So we're gonna just keep pointing prograde and play this out. 36. Notice we've gone through about 100 liquid fuel. So this design would have been fine with fewer intakes, because I am still at full throttle at 42 kilometers. I did not expect that. But notice our thrusts are decreasing, but they're the same. Alright, we just flamed out, so I hit my action key, and I'm going to try and restore normal flight attitude. You can actually throttle up your jets just a little bit, and it will, the gimbaling will help a little. So stop it from going right, go left a little bit. I'm going to throttle up to about 2/3, and we're flat spinning again. And we're actually fine. 170 kilometers is plenty. We can just deactivate the jets from here, turn on our nuke. Now we have full oxidizer, but not full liquid fuel, and that's fine, because we've gone through about 54 liquid fuel on each, so that's 108. So we still have plenty of liquid fuel because we have the backup tank with 150. So even though this shows partial usage, that's because the liquid fuel is empty on those tanks. Not exactly sure why it does that. So we're going to set the moon as our target. Now notice I've already done a similar SSTO to the moon in this save just as a trial. And we're just going to kind of glide up until our apoapsis, and then get circularized and then burn to the moon. So we're going to turn off the fine controls. Alright, can time warp normally. I also have been experimenting with a heavy lifter payload, which can bring a full orange tank into orbit or an exploration craft. And then the exploration craft, it was kind of cool. I got an exploration craft with 7,000 delta V into orbit, dropped it off, and then went and landed with the launch stage. So we're going to go ahead and throttle up here. And now your wing orientation doesn't really matter except for making it look nice. 60. I'm just going to barely get into orbit here. So, well, I mean, relatively. Alright. I'm going to find the moon. And then I'm going to time warp until... Cheater's Guide to get to the moon, just point at the moon and burn for it when your prograde indicator becomes close to the moon indicator. For example, somewhere around now. Of course, we want to burn 90. Just burn prograde. Until you have a moon intercept. Of course, with the low thrust to weight ratios, it takes a little longer. It's generally an 800 meter per second to 900 meter per second burn. That's why we start burning when it's a little below the horizon. So we're going to speed up time here. Notice how stable it is. It's barely having physics warp issues, so we're going to put it 3 times. And turn on fine controls so we get an adjustment of 90 degrees. And SAS should keep us there for the majority of the trip. Gone through about 100 oxidizer. Oxidizer is what you want to watch. Just gonna keep burning prograde. And we're gonna cut, slow down our time warp, turn off fine controls. Did I do that? Yes, I did. And we're just going to burn slowly. You can also use the thrust limiter on the nuke or, you know, whatever rocket you're using. So we're just going to... Oh, too far. We don't want to hit the moon, so we're going to slow down a little bit. 7,000, 12,000. There we go. Quick save it, because you never know. And time warp. Sorry for the sound effects. Those are completely intentional. Slow down for the transition, or a little off kilter, but that's fine. Looks like we'll be landing relatively close to our old landing spot. That's also fine. So we're just going to start doing our deceleration burn. And I'm gonna decelerate against the horizon initially, closer to the horizon, so we kill more horizontal velocity, because generally that's what you want to kill first, rather than vertical. Because we're eventually gonna go down and land anyway. Alright, let's get rid of that indicator there. And as we come down below 10,000 meters, there we have orbit. Inside, of course. As we come down to below 10,000 meters, I'm going to adjust so that we're going to be pointing more towards the directly retrograde position. In fact, we're going to point higher than it so that we buy us some time on our descent to slow down. It's a little dangerous to time warp, but I think we'll be okay. And now we don't want to go up too much. I'm going to kill off horizontal velocity. There, we killed most of it off. In fact, may have started going the other way. Gotta quick save it because we can definitely land from here. And so with space planes, it's hard to guess where the ground is a lot of times, just unless you have lights positioned on it, which is fine to add, but because the landing gear lights point upwards. There's kind of a trick for landing with a space plane And what I try to do is I hover with my generally nuke or wings or whatever the lowest part on your craft is right above the surface, and then you, with your landing gear, you just tip down real quick, and on lighter gravity bodies it'll prevent you from hitting the ground too hard. So we should be fine oxidizer level wise, just from the looks of it. I didn't carry mech jeb along because I wanted to show it's pretty easy to do without mech jeb. See how the lights, I have them on, but they're not showing up yet. So we're going to start throttling up a little bit. Okay, bounced. Luckily our wings are quite resilient. And we're going to tilt down and turn on the brakes. There we go. And hopefully. So another good thing about putting the center mass near the rear landing gear is that with SAS torque, once we go to take off, we can just tilt upwards, or else we'd have to do a run up and hope for a hill of some sort. So it's gonna come guzumi. It's gonna come out. Another tip: try not to put your flag right in the path of your takeoff route. I've run into it before, or had to taxi around it before, so I generally put it behind right now. I wonder if this will go through the plane. Hopefully not. Close. Alright, one small plane. And we shall proceed back in. So another thing you can do is if you put a small probe on your craft, for higher gravity bodies, you can actually lower one of the landing gear. For example, I'll show you. Oh, that was weird. If you lower one of the landing gear, or raise it rather, and you keep the others lowered, you can actually climb up on the wing and walk your Kerbal up the wing to get him on there. That works on lathe, depending on your spacecraft design, of course. So we're going to point upwards, and we should just have to burn at the 90. So we're going to have to do a little turning as we take off, but that should be fine. Going through our flag. So we're trying to angle upwards. Little hairy, but it'll work. Now we're gonna point 90. Raise our gear. Oh, I already raised it. And get out of here. And point down towards the equator, or towards the 90. Because right now we are burning, if we point directly at the horizon, we're burning retrograde to our Kerbal orbit. So we're just going to bring this down. We're not going to aim specifically for the Space Center, but it has enough jet fuel that if you want, you can skip it off the atmosphere as you come down, and I might even attempt to do that. So still have 90 oxidizer total, so I think we'll be okay on that. I'm trying to bring my prograde marker to the 90, so now that it's close, we're gonna just keep burning. Just keep burning, just keep burning. Of course, the control surfaces still work, but they don't do anything because there's no atmosphere for them to use. 28 oxidizer in each tank. Technically in orbit. Speed up time just a little bit. And there we go. Gonna burn it down now. $30 oxidizer. Blah. Alright. Let's actually burn up our periapsis just a little bit. There we go, 34. Quick save it. Quick, save it! And fly on back home. So now, since we're low on fuel, this is when it's most important to have worried about your fuel drain. So we're going to be coming in relatively far from the Space Center. So we're going to actually, well, we're going to just aim for land. Generally, another way you could do it is come in around 40,000, burn down, use the air resistance to burn down your apoapsis to a reasonable height, and then do a deorbit burn from there onto the Space Center. So that would be your best bet if you want full recovery value of the craft. Now, anywhere you land, as long as most of it's intact, you'll get at least a partial value recover. Another video that I'll be coming out with soon is the video for I have a reusable space plane for rescuing guys. So I'm going to turn on my jets now because we're deep into the atmosphere. Turn off my brakes. The lights don't matter. But notice how we're keeping our orientation. That's because we planned out the fuel flow and have our high drag areas behind our center of mass. So I'm actually going to throttle up and try and arrest some of my vertical speed. And this will allow us to come in over land, hopefully. I'm also going to turn slightly. So I actually want to come up above the atmosphere a little bit. I think we should be burning out of here. Yeah. So we're out of liquid fuel in those tanks. We still have a little oxidizer we can use. We'll use that if our landing gets screwed up and we end up coming in backwards. Notice how we're climbing now. Gonna put our apoapsis up fairly high, so I'm gonna pitch up a little bit. Another thing you could do is close a lot of the air intakes, and that would decrease drag. Right now these all have 2 drag on them, but you don't need them all. You need maybe a third of them right now. So we're going to keep climbing. Going to speed up time some. No, speeding up time increases your intake air by however much. Like 3 times gives you 3 times the intake air, so we're at like 0.4 now, so 1.2. So we're just going to keep accelerating until our apoapsis is up fairly high. And we're going to cut our throttles because we don't want to use all of our jet fuel. We need some to help us come down just in case. So we're just going to kind of glide. We're going to continue to turn. There's a crater. You can barely see it because it's so dark. Look how stable it is. I'm going to turn off SAS. That's what you want. You want it to... No, I just tapped the controls. You want it to default to pointing prograde. So obviously time warp was not helping us there. So we're going to flip around and see how it wants to point prograde. That's a good indicator. Right now it just wants to point. I don't know where it wants to point. We're going to fall deep into the atmosphere and then we're going to use our jets to try and get us away from the water. Because though I can land... There we go. Hello? There we are. Gonna turn on SAS. A lot of times if you're flat spinning, SAS does not help. We're not flat spinning though, so we should be okay. Because SAS will continue to try to bring you to your previous place on the nav ball. So it's so it'll continuously try and if you're spinning around, it'll go left right on some of the yaw controls, or it depends on which controls it's using. But we're gonna watch our jet fuel, not let that fall too much. Try and get over near land. greenhouse are starting to really burn through that jet fuel. So now I'm going to speed up time. I'm going to gain some altitude, because up at higher altitudes we actually have higher efficiency. We have really high efficiency now, and I think we'll be okay. I'm going to actually cut throttle, turn off our engines, and we're going to try and land on this little strip here. So, yeah, so notice how it was really stable coming in. That's because, as I said before, we had our high drag elements towards the rear of the craft, and our center of lift was inside our center of mass. And that allows it to be more controllable. In fact, I might aim for this little beach portion right here. Fine controls plus time warp is a good combo, by the way. But we're going to slow down time warp. Lower our landing gear. It's going to be a little hairy, but should be able to make it. Turn on my jets a little bit, give us some extra velocity. And I'm going to get over this little crest here, and then try and land on the beach. On the beach. If you land going uphill, it'll help slow you down a little more, but it's dangerous because you might hit an area where the slope drops off and you might fly for a second and end up dying. So we're going to try and really hope this is a flat area on the beach here. We're going to keep our brakes off for now. I'm going to come in flat and then go to the level that it's at once we get close, like such. We lost some air intakes. There's some more. Wings still there though. Trying to turn on my brakes now. And there we are. Only lost, let's see, we lost 3 air intakes in a docking port. So this would still be flyable. You can always I like to put docking ports on the front so you can actually refuel it. And if you bring it back to the Space Center, that obviously it's a lot easier to refuel. Thanks so much guys for watching. I hope you learned something. This has been Derp Nerd. Take care.